And we also did daily reflections. And every single time, it was, well, what does this have to do with running a business? What does this have to do with anything, right? What does being able to cut that piece of glass in that swirly motion, what does that, so what? And I'd actually ask that, so what? And they'd come back and say, well, this is why. This is why it was important. I was really frustrated. I didn't think I could do it. I got really good at it. Or so-and-so's really good at that, and I'm better at this. And starting to point out those things. So that debrief is really important. The Alicia curriculum is a framework that you can use. And how you facilitate it depends on how you want to shape your program. Our particular program, it was focused on our business. And again, we kept bringing it back, so what? What does this have to do with business? What does this have to do with your life? What did you learn? I think what it also did is the Alicia curriculum was like a tech manual. So they had specific things that they had to learn. It wasn't just reading a book. They actually had to go back. It's like, wait, there's information that I need to use tomorrow at the Red Barn. So I need to process this information differently, just like you would at a workplace. When you're handed a pamphlet on safety, or you're handed a pamphlet on how to run a machine, it's not just a nice read I can flip through. I actually have to process the information differently. And again, debriefing every day was really important. The other thing that we did sort of in design was really learning from the world at large. As I say, we had the Alicia curriculum that we followed for the creative, the production side of things. And then what we did is we focused really on team building, because a big part of being able to be successful in a workplace is how you work with others. At the beginning, everybody comes in as individuals, like this, right? At the end, they were an amazing, both sessions, they were amazing little teams. And they felt the difference. They felt the shift. The first week, that orientation week, I drew in a lot of pieces that we use in the workplace. We did personality inventory. So we did true colors. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with the true colors. It's based on, it's like a Myers-Briggs, but it's a very accessible Myers-Briggs. Very inexpensive to do. We actually had a community partner come in and do it, and they loved it. For most of them, they learned so much just from being that self-awareness piece. It's easy to do, and it's something they have for the rest of their lives. And it's something that they can attach to essential skills. We did that at the beginning and all throughout, every single day, even in debrief. People would say, wait, that was a really orange thing to do, or that was, and being able to identify those things. And when we did our marketing, it's like, well, how would you market to a blue person? How would you market to a green person? What's going to be different? How are you going to talk to them differently? You can go online for very inexpensive and do an online colors. It's very easy. You can get the book and learn yourself. You don't have to be registered trainer. There's probably somebody in your community that will come in and do it for you on a volunteer basis. Very powerful self-awareness tool, one that they can take into the workplace, and it's one that oftentimes in workplaces we use often. The other thing we did for self-awareness is conflict styles, and again, it's in your resources. There's one called the Craybill Conflict Style. It's inexpensive. You can download it for, I think, $2.50 off the website. You just have to it's sort of on an honor system to sort of buy them. And it's an inventory and it explains conflict styles in according to sort of agendas and relationship kind of thing. So it's a really great lens to look through conflict styles and how conflict is managed. And again, it became a tool, and it became language that we could use throughout the whole program to understand what was going on. So it took it out of the personal and it put it into the process. Very, very important. And again, key in being able to survive in small businesses, because you can't hide behind a production line when there's 3 employees in a company. And again, it's something, if you don't have the background in doing it, the Craybill Conflict, they have all the facilitator notes. It tells you exactly how to debrief and facilitate it. An excellent tool, an inexpensive tool. And again, one that will, something that they can take, a strategy that they can take into the workplace. Another thing we did was a lot of team building activities. We did Lost at Sea. Again, these are all things you can just pull off, and I've got them in the resources. You can pull them off the website. The NASA moon thing, and actually in Alicia curriculum, there's a bunch of team building things there as well. The making breakfast for an aliens, these types of things, which don't have anything to do with stained glass. It doesn't have anything to do with making a business, but again, you debrief it and bring it back. And it helps to bring the team together, because the more they can work together as a team, more successful they're going to be in the workplace. So that was sort of our first week, and throughout the whole session, we really focused on that. And again, the essential skills, the complexity level of essential skills that you're getting at, the thinking, the critical thinking, decision making, problem solving, the working with others, the continuous learning, it just reinforces that in a different context. And the feedback from a lot of the group was, gosh, I went home and you know what? I get my husband finally, he's green, or I was really able to use that with my son, and they felt the difference at home immediately. The other thing that we did a lot of, sorry, my technology, no, we'll go back. We did, I pulled a lot of videos off of the internet. So we did the marshmallow challenge, which I've got some photos, I think, of that coming up. Again, right off the web, you need spaghetti, a marshmallow, some masking tape, and string. And it's a team building exercise. Fabulous website called tedtalks.com. If you're not familiar with it, go to it. It's fabulous. They could watch a video about it. It's called TED Talks. It's in the resources as well. And so they did the marshmallow challenge, and then they watched a video about a guy explaining about the marshmallow challenge and how kindergartners do it way better than MBAs, and how, that whole thing. So it's a team building one, but it's also talking about process, right? How we think about things and how we have to make mistakes and that type of thing. And again, the debrief is, so what does that have to do with stained glass? When did that happen when we were making jewelry? When did that happen? They could identify those things. And how does that matter in the workplace? What can you see? So pulling all those things together, and the connections, you could just see it go and cement right in as soon as you bring all these disparate things in. We also did another one I have to highly recommend is on TED Talks is the Rube Goldberg machine. There's a group that does these online videos called OK something or other, and it's about this process. So lots of really interesting things. It doesn't have anything to do with what they were doing, but it has everything to do, because then they can draw on the successes or the issues that came up with stained glass making or the blacksmithing and things in their lives and connect it with this other thing. So it's always connecting to the world at large, and being able to see that on the screen and being able to see, oh, it happens elsewhere, widens the scope of what they're actually doing and how it applies, and their ability to analyze those things was huge. The last thing that we did was actually running the business. This was, we had the Leisha curriculum, the learning from the world at large, and then actually running the business. I'm just being mindful of time but what we did is we actually did a process where we chose a charity because we wanted to raise money. This in itself was a fantastic experience for the individuals. With the one group, we started off, and again, this is part of the collaborative learning. I step back and say, okay, we need to donate to a charity. Who are we going to donate to? Oh, we're going to, and all of a sudden this cacophony comes up, and everybody's talking, and no, it should be this. And after about 3 minutes, all of a sudden everyone's going, did that work? No. How are we going to change it? I don't know. How are we going to choose a charity? Well, let's figure out what could we do. We learned how to brainstorm. This is what a brainstorm is. This is how to brainstorm. Great. Now we've got 60 charities listed out. How are we going to ever decide? What do you think we should do? Well, let's pick a criteria. And again, they self-identified these things. And then I identified that's a criteria. So what are our criteria? We came up with 5 criteria. Okay, let's circle the ones. We still have 10 to choose from. What do we need to do? We need to find out more about these charities. Great, let's go out, do some research. Let's come back. The whole process, again, at the very beginning, to walk it through very visibly and to be able to feel the difference. In the end, they replicated that throughout the whole program. The charity that, and they chose several different charities, and they came up with different things. The charity piece was huge. We raised over $3,000 for different charities in the community, those 2 groups. They volunteered for a day as well. Really neat story. The first group chose Community Care for Seniors as their group, and they were a fantastic partner to come down and work with us, meeting with us, quite collaborative. We got a phone call on our second to last week, I think it was, and the learners were madly trying to get their sale done and all this kind of stuff. They had a lot of work for their business. And Community Care for Seniors called us like, we're short on volunteers. We have a tag day to do where you stand on the street and sell tags and stuff like that. We don't have enough volunteers. I said, well, I'll put it to this team and see if anybody's interested. I said, if anybody's interested, 8 hands shot up in the air. Absolutely, we'll do it. When is it? Well, it's Friday. Well, how, it's for the whole day, but you don't have to do it now. No, we'll do the whole day, they said. And then they thought, oh, wait a second. We have to get our marketing done. We have all these things to do. Immediately, they went into reorg mode. And they reorganized their tasks. They shifted things around. They reprioritized. I was sitting there watching them going, holy smokes. And they said, okay. They pulled out a piece of paper. They scheduled themselves. And they went upstairs and gave it to the Community Care for Seniors. Here's our schedule. They did that. It took them 15 minutes. It was unbelievable. And then they spent the whole day on a Friday. It was stinking hot on the street asking for money. And most of them said that was their best day ever. One young man said, I couldn't believe it. Somebody came up and thanked me. They came up and they said, thank you so much for doing this. He said, I felt so good. Nobody has ever said that to me before. These are usually individuals that people are sort of, crossing the street to get away from. And again, they noticed, like, they were all old people out there volunteering. It's like, yeah, what can you do? And a lot of them made that commitment afterwards, like, yeah, you know what? I really like the volunteering. I'm going to do more volunteering. They put it on their resumes. They had a reference. A lot of them were afraid because of their criminal records that they couldn't volunteer. And Community Care for Seniors was great. They said, no, absolutely you can. Fill out this form. They became attached to something else. Huge. We did, again, I'm just sort of going to ping on a couple of these success stories as we were running the business. We were working to do a group piece, and one individual was struggling with her attendance, and she didn't show up, which had an impact because they were each doing a piece of this group project. And at first, people were sort of angry. They're like, wait a second, come down our ladders of inference, all these things that we learned. They said, well, maybe something's come up. Maybe her son is sick. Maybe there are things. Let's not worry about that because we don't know why she's not here. Let's reorganize. So what colors do you think? What do we have to do? They reorganized the work very mindfully. They thought about her, and they thought, well, she might come back, so what are we going to do? Myself, and I'd gone down to Linda, I said, that's it, she's out. She's not showing up. I came back from a break, and 2 of the participants had taken their break, gone to her house, knocked on her door, said, come on back, we need you, brought her back. The whole team said, oh, thank goodness you're here, it's so good to see you, come on in. She didn't miss a day after that. That was one of her big things. She said, I didn't realize how much they actually needed me. And the group sort of, they accommodated for her, but at the same time they said, it's really important that you're here. And it demonstrated to each of them how each single person in that group meant so much. But in doing that, we also introduced the whole concept of risk assessment. Well, yeah, that's right. It is a risk if somebody doesn't show up. What do we do? How do we mitigate that? And we went through that whole process. And from that, they said, well, wait a second. We've got to do one of those for the day of the sale. What if it rains? Absolutely. And again, it just started becoming part of their way of thinking. So by running the business and organizing a business around it, all these concepts were introduced in a very real-time way. And they were able to come up with solutions. Big thing was the team building at the very beginning was paramount to that. What else? We did a lot of press releases. Not that you don't necessarily do a press release for a business, but it's a good structure for writing. In the blacksmithing group, it worked out really well. One young man, he'd always been a cook and stuff like that, but he always loved to read. And he got into doing the press releases because he thought, well, I really quite like writing. It gave him a chance to be on the computer because usually he'd just write out things and then he'd type them on the computer. He learned how to cut and paste and move things around, which led to, he wasn't really interested in the business side, but he really liked to write. We happened to have a tutor down at the Learning Center who had a couple hours available, so he shifted over and spent a couple hours with her a week, and I said, well, let's make your project, instead of the business part, why don't you write something for us? So he wrote a manuscript, started a book. I said, it has to do with blacksmithing, and he started to write. And he wrote, 4 or 5 chapters of a book. It's about a serial killer because he loves to read Stephen King, but it was a blacksmith, and he's still writing it. I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and he wanted to find out if I knew an RCMP person that he could talk to because he needed to get some background because one of his characters, unbelievable. And now he's thinking about maybe going and doing journalism because then he could still write, but then it would be sort of creative writing, or maybe he'll do the creative writing thing. Before that, he was thinking, well, maybe I'll just go and be a cook still. So, all these things, it's spin-offs, right? Some of our successes. We had a 90% completion rate. In our first group, we had 8 students in our first group. One person didn't complete, and she just missed the last week because she